Hi, everybody. I absolutely love I'm hanging out jiving behind this microphone to my very own startup music. This is Act Now. You're watching ActTV. I'm Julianna Forlano. I gave you a little hint of who's going to be on our show today. Ben Burgess, host of Give Them an Argument, the podcast, and the author of Canceling Comedians While the World Burns. I wonder what we're going to discuss today. Actually, he's going to be doing the headlines with me first up. And then we have a couple of other folks coming on. We've got an interview with David Mitchell, who is talking about, exactly what is going into he's with Patients for Affordable Drugs Now. It's the only national bipartisan patient organization focused on the politics to lower drug prices. And we're going to talk about that and the Build Back Better Act and what is exactly in it. We'll talk about what Bernie Sanders had to say about that. And then yesterday, ActTV's very own Jocelyn Macurdy Keatts was at an action in D.C., the one where Alyssa Milano got arrested trying to protect voting rights. We have clips, we've got coverage, and we have our woman on the scene coming to talk about what happened and what it means. All that coming up on the show. Don't forget to hit that like button and tell your friends, or just sit back on your couch. If you're watching us on Roku or Apple TV, you could still tell your friends. Whatever. Up first, headlines. Hi, Ben. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me back.
I got to say, headlines is one of my favorite things. And we just started having other people doing headlines with me, not just me actually saying what the headlines are. And I found it so much more fun. Ben Burgess, host of Give Them an Argument, the podcast. I'm going to be on your podcast tonight. So it's a double Ben Juliana opportunity for people today. Thanks for inviting me on there. I can't wait.
Yeah, no, should be really good. We're gonna watch Charlie Kirk debating abortion rights with Ben Glebe. So it's maybe a little actually sadistic on my part that I asked you to watch over an hour of Charlie Kirk, but nevertheless, I think it should be fun.
Eyeballs burning. Okay, and that's at 8 p.m. Go to Give Them an Argument on Twitter, and you can get the links and all of that. But right now, we have a bunch of stuff I want to talk to you about. You were the author of Canceling Comedians While the World Burns. Obviously, we need to talk about Dave Chappelle since you wrote basically the book on this. But I think I want to start with talking about Striketober. That is the word everyone's using to talk about how many millions of Americans across the country are on strike. This weekend, the Entertainment Workers Union reached an agreement on a new TV and film contract. You know that, and averting a strike so that we can all thankfully still have entertainment in our homes. The John Deere workers are going on strike. Kellogg's folks, the El Milagro tortilla people, and just right here, I drove by the Dollar General, and those people were on strike. What is happening, Ben?
Yeah, I think this is by far the best and most exciting thing that's happened in a very long time. I mean, it's small by historical standards. If you look at the kind of nationwide strike wave that happened right after World War II or something that happened in the 70s, but by the standards of America for the last several decades, this is a absolutely ridiculous explosion of militancy by workers. And it's not hard to see why, because this is the flip side of all of the, those little signs, taped up to the window of Burger King, that people have been seeing for the last several months saying, sorry, restricted hours, we're understaffed, that, hey, finally, a lot of workers in the United States feel like they're in a position where, at least if they organize collectively, they actually have some real bargaining power, because you can't have it both ways. It can't be both, oh, you don't want this job, great, 10 other people will take it, and sorry, we have to close Burger King at 9 p.m. because we can't find anybody for the extra shifts. Yeah. So that means that people are realizing that they have this power and can finally use it to kind of push back against the beating that labor has taken for the last several decades. I mean, it's the same reason why a lot of people have just as individuals, in non-unionized industries, just been quitting terrible jobs that they were only holding on to because they had no realistic other options. Because, hey, right now, tight labor market, you could actually, it's much easier to see how you could get another job, not to mention that a lot of people, in various industries that maybe were not operating in the normal way throughout the really bad part of the pandemic before the vaccines, okay, they got a taste of what it would be like to actually have some work-life balance and.
Is that what happened? Because I'm just like, where did everyone go? Why does no one need a job anymore? I don't, it can't be that people don't want to work. And now that there's, this just isn't, that's just a talking point of the right saying, oh, people are lazy. And once they get a taste of laziness.
Nobody wants, it's not that people don't want to work, although I think it is that some people don't want to work terrible jobs where it's completely unpredictable. You don't know from week to week what your hours are going to be. You're not really paid, you're paid terrible sub-living wages. You have no autonomy on there at all. I think that it is actually true that there are, the germ of truth in the right-wing talking point is I think there really are people who got a sense of what it would be like to have a slightly more reasonable life for a human being than what you're subjected to at a lot of these jobs, and liked it and started to think about, not that they don't want to work, but, whether their only option is to work for this particular place.
Well, I think and I noticed you were tweeting about it, the John Deere workers that are walking off the job in Iowa, they have an open-ended strike that started just a few days ago. I think the one that's so interesting to me because it's because they're pissed off that John Deere is making like tons of money and they're getting nothing. I think the CEO gave himself a 160% raise on top of what it was already making, which was egregious, and a 17% dividend raise, I think it was. And the workers are stuck holding the bag as it were. I think that's really interesting because they're striking because of injustice. Whereas like the Bessemer plant and the El Milagro tortilla factory, they're going to kill us inside of this factory by not air conditioning it and whatever. What are your thoughts about this?
Yeah, I think they're also striking, against injustice in a different sense, which is that some of what's being objected to, I think in the John Deere case and a couple of these others, are these two-tier contracts whereby people who came in, more recently, are not given some of the same benefits, protections, wages as people who are iced in, because they've been working there forever, which means that there are a lot of older workers who are really striking not on their own behalf, right, but out of solidarity with younger workers, who don't get the same deal that they have.
That is really in contrast to the El Milagro taco, or I keep saying tacos, they're tortillas that they make, because that company was like paying new workers more than they were paying people who'd been on the job for 20, 30, years, decades and decades, giving the new people more benefits, more pay than the people who'd been loyal to them for all that time. Very interesting.
Yeah, I think in both cases, like that, however they think that any given company thinks they have to work it, if they can get away, they feel like for one reason or another, whether it's something that's been unionized, since the 1970s, and they really can't mess with the older workers, paying benefits, but they think they can get away with screwing over younger ones, or whether it's, hey, these people already have jobs, they're not gonna, they're not going to want to lose it, whereas we might need to pay people more to tempt them in. I think in a lot of these cases, the common thread is the workers want to say, no, this is ridiculous. Everybody's doing the same job. Everybody should get the same deal, the same benefits. That if and if there's a difference, it should be a difference that's like based on something like regular and predictable that feels fair, like seniority, not like just what's in the interest of the company to do for their profits, at any given time. We don't really care about that much because we can see that you guys are raking it in while you're pretending like you don't have, money to take care of all of us.
I thought it was pretty interesting. There you are. I thought it was pretty interesting. I lost my train of thought because I thought I had disappeared and then you had disappeared, but here we are. Technology is still running. Thank God the lights are still on. Anyway, I just think it's so interesting. We talked to Professor Wolf on the program, economist Professor Wolf here quite a bit. And he's always talking about what could help here is he talks two things. He talks about worker co-ops because his organization is called Democracy at Work. And like there would be no need really for strikes if there were at least some in each individual worker co-op, because no one's going to vote to keep the temperature at 9,000 degrees when they have to themselves work in there. And then it would also, like, if say we had, oh God, let's dare to dream 25% of our businesses were worker-owned co-ops, even the big businesses, they would compete with these other hierarchical organizations, and people would probably want to work at the co-ops where they would own part of it, where they would not vote to send their own jobs overseas, that kind of thing. So I don't know. What are your thoughts about the possibility of us seeing some worker co-ops spring out of this current movement?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I think that certainly, that would be long-term, the best option that, because at a co-op, like a big one, that's not just like a, coffee shop that 5 people work at and own, but like if
you got to start somewhere.
Sure. Right. But like the co-op version of John Deere, right? Like that, like something like that. Like, so the equivalent would be like Mondragon, in Spain, where there are like, it's really a federation of co-ops, but there are like tens of thousands of members. You vote every couple of years, whatever it is, however long the period is, on an operating agreement, which is like a union contract, except it's unilateral. There's no boss on the other end of the bargaining table. And so the only pressure is like, okay, well, what do we actually need to do to kind of keep the lights on and, all this stuff. But like, other than that, right, you can have it be dictated by the preferences of the workers themselves. I think that would absolutely be, the sort of long-term, like the long-term best solution. Although I also think that, there are a lot of barriers to, more cooperative businesses starting up in kind of the existing system. I think you need to,
sure.
I think that like, you can't just sort of like compete, starting from nothing. Right. I mean, I don't think you can, compete them out of, existence or anything. I think you need politics,
we need politics. I mean, you could, like Germany, insist that, so many members of the working people are on the board, or, the government could do what Italy does, which is if people are out of work and they could get a lump sum, if they can find 10 other out of work people, they get a lump sum if they want to start a worker owned business co-op. And that's been very successful in certain areas. Yeah.
Emilia Romagna. Yeah, that absolutely. I mean, I guess the one other thing I'd say about this is I think that one thing that I find really excited about this, like this, one of the reasons that I think this wave of strikes is so exciting, is that so much of like how we think about what politics is, what people get excited about on a day-to-day basis, is all about the culture war, and that's sort of about like what what region you come from, what news networks you trust, what whether you like the pronouns in the bio or you're annoyed by the pronouns in the bio, whether you like Joe Rogan better than Sanjay Gupta or vice versa, whatever, right? Like all of that stuff, and all of that stuff is very polarizing, like within working class people, that those things tend to like sort of split that in, not necessarily exactly in half, but, like big chunks on both ends. Whereas I think stuff like this, without sort of giving up on the socially progressive things, which, are absolutely important and non-negotiable, but still, I think that stuff like this is a sort of shows a path forward for progressive politics that's not polarized along culture war lines, that has the potential to repolarize things on much better and more useful lines. Like I saw the other day, 40% of John Deere workers on strike, voted for Trump, right? But they aren't. But they're still on strike, with all of their, fellow workers, who did what the UAW wanted them to do and, voted for Biden, because they can see that it's in their interest. And so it's not about all of the constant culture war stuff.
Yeah. It would be nice if we had more than 2 parties.
Yeah,
maybe some parties that would reflect people's other, you wouldn't have to vote against your economic interests to vote for your social interests. That would be okay.
Yeah, no, I mean, a multi-party system would be great. I mean, I don't, at the same way that it would be wonderful if we had those policies like the one in Italy that you mentioned, and
I like talking about these because we reach an audience that isn't purely on the left. They're kind of all over the place, and so I remember not even knowing about what was happening in Italy. I mean, so there's ideas of worker co-ops and ideas that other governments are doing this. And it's not like Cuba, because they've been besmirched so much. You can't even imagine, you cannot.
Not that, I mean, not that I think, Cuba isn't, like it's not, like in American politics, like we always seem to have to talk about Cuba like it's Mordor. It's
exactly.
It's a complicated society. They have done some things right, and I think we should be able to acknowledge that too.
Yes.
But yeah, no, I agree with you. I think we should talk about these more ambitious long-term goals for sure. Get it out there. But I think that the exciting thing about Striketober is that like the only way any of this is ever going to become a reality is if there's some sort of massive pressure from outside of the usual system, because we know what the usual system produces. I mean, we're seeing it all the time in the, like the negotiations about, can you have, okay, Bernie wanted free college, Biden wasn't going to do that. He'll at least do free community college. Nope, sorry, Kirsten Sinema says you can't do that, right? Like the usual system doesn't really deliver anything. Like even as incremental reforms as tiny as like, we'll at least pay for you to go to community college. Yeah, you can't even get that from that. So I think if you're going to get,
I'm surprised they don't try to roll back high school, which they kind of are by undermining the public education so that it's not private school isn't just for people of means anymore. Like everyone is trying to their,
absolutely. And by the way, I wish people cared about as much about that as they do about all this culture war stuff, about exactly what goes in the high school curriculum. I would love to live in a world where people got as excited about like class sizes, the attacks on teachers unions, as they do about whether, ethnic studies
we're going to be using slavery. Yeah. We're going to actually say the word slavery.
Whether some microscopic trace of critical race theory has made it into 10th grade English or whatever. Yeah.
Yes. I'm with you on that. I mean, I love what you said about, I'm going to transitioning over to the Dave Chappelle thing, which I have not waded into the controversy, really, because I watched it and laughed. And then I felt terrible, like I'm a terrible person now, because most of the people, I read like Roxane Gay and what she says and some other folks, but I did laugh, which is, that's it. My show's over, it's crushing. But the part of this that I think I would love to pick your brain on, just your whole thoughts about that. But coming off our talk about the Striketober, it's kind of interesting that Dave Chappelle's the people walking out of Netflix are getting more media attention and really stealing focus than the people who are walking out of their jobs because of inhumane working conditions. I think that's interesting and frustrating.
Yeah, especially because, I mean, I don't know if you know this off the top of your head. I don't, but like, realistically, how many people were we actually talking about for the Netflix walkout?
Right.
I mean, I would be amazed if there were like 500 people who walked out of Netflix, right? Like, I don't think we're talking about anything on that scale. That would be my guess. Maybe I'm wrong. But whereas we're talking about like thousands or tens of thousands of, people going on strike. I mean, if the, looks like it's been averted, but I mean, if the Yahtzee strike had happened in Hollywood, I mean, that would have been cataclysmic. And that's something that like you could read, this is in the New York Times. You could read the New York Times like, and you could, nobody reads the entire thing, but like you could read a lot of it and not even know that the Yahtzee thing was going on,
right?
Or like barely be aware that the John Deere thing was going on. And one thing I do often find a little frustrating in this is, look, obviously I'm a Democratic socialist. I think everybody should be unionized, but it is a little frustrating sometimes that that workers in certain kinds of elite media positions, because trust me, nobody who's walking out of Netflix over this. I'm going to lay down a marker, so if I'm wrong, everybody can make fun of me later.
I think one worker did. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I mean, walking out, then they just walk back in. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
It's not a strike. They have no demands, as far as I know. They're not like, take it down. It's already out there. They can't pull the contract back and take money. They can, what are they going to, what? They're just.
Yeah. And so like these workers, anybody who's walking out and walking back into Netflix, even the people doing that, they're not going to be like, there are no janitors walking out of Netflix over this, right? Like these, so people who are elite media workers, oftentimes, what they're really more interested in is this kind of culture war stuff, or even at like the New York Times, like the Writers Guild there, sort of, they want to like fight about the editorial standards, of what's published there. Which is fine. I mean, it's not like that should be sacrosanct, that you can't argue about that, although I just wouldn't necessarily have the same instincts that they do about that, but whatever. Like, I think the problem with the media is that what's sayable is too narrow, not too broad, but like whatever, like this is not the stuff that's going to get most workers excited. And I think that
it's fodder for the culture war. It's giving.
No, absolutely. I mean, look, you're asked about the Dave Chappelle special. One of the most revealing things about the Dave Chappelle special is, granted, it's not a scientific poll. These are people who cared enough to weigh in. But if you look at Rotten Tomatoes, they have a critic score and an audience score. Now, again, that's a critic who cared enough to write a review versus an audience member who cared enough to to fill out the form or whatever. So it's self-selected, but like the critic score is like 30% or something, whereas the audience score is like 99%.
Yeah, because everyone laughed.
Yeah, exactly. They thought it was funny.
Everyone laughed, and I didn't agree with everything he said. And there were some points where I was like, "Oh my goodness, he's gonna get in trouble for that one," And it's Dave Chappelle. I would have been just as happy if he talked about pretty much anything. So if he didn't do this, that would have been fine. But
yeah, but I think most people see that and they say, "Oh, that's funny," or whatever. Like maybe there are things that he says they'll think about later and decide whether they agree with or disagree with. But like mostly, it's just funny, and I think so one
book canceling comedian. It's not going to work. What they're doing anyway.
No, it's not, and in fact, the real point of that, right? I mean, the reason that I kind of picked that like example. I mean, that was the first chapter on comedy. And then it kind of moved on to other subjects. But the reason that I picked that first chapter for the title is that I think it's such a dramatic illustration of the problem that the larger book is about, which is the way that certainly liberal politics, but even to the left of liberal, actually leftist politics in the U.S. has been hijacked by this kind of super unhelpful moralism that is, of which I think one of the most extreme examples is getting upset at what somebody says in a stand-up comedy special, and like treating this as if it's a political issue. And I think the only effect is that it makes progressives look like overgrown hall monitors to normal people, by which I don't, normal people, that's not a dog whistle. I just mean people who don't think about politics all day, every day.
Right.
Like strange people.
It does. And I think it just plays right into the hands of like the right wing talk media machine. And sometimes I think, has this been stoked by, there are people who want to destroy our society outside of our own country. And so you wind up thinking like, is this just been, I don't know, you get into crazy land, or it's possible like this foment has been just stoked because it certainly hands Fox News 6 months worth of talking points.
No, I certainly hope so, because the alternative is that we don't need anybody to stoke it. We're just going to do this to ourselves, and
Oh.
that's actually worse, right? So, I think,
my friend. Excellent point.
I think that, like, I mean, we can have whatever level of detail you want to get into. I mean, we could have a discussion about what's actually said in the special. I actually wrote something up about this. I knew, I write a column for Jacobin, but like I just put this on Medium because I knew that Jacobin, wouldn't want any part, of arguing about this
said issue. Yes,
arguing about Dave Chappelle, right. And I don't blame them, but because people did keep asking because I wrote that book, so like I wrote up a little thing that I just stuck it on Medium. People can check out, what I say there, benburgess.medium.com. But I guess the big thing I'd say about it is just, I think that there are, if you're going to sort of take what's being said here in a really straightforward way, which I actually think is always a little dodgy, because stand-up comedy, the way it works is it's not an editorial. It's not like an academic lecture. It's not like every sentence that you're saying, you really literally seriously mean that thing.
No.
Because, the whole point is that you're telling jokes, right? I mean,
right.
That's
exactly.
how.
Well, the point is, if the audience laughs, that's your job. And I'm like, okay, I see that our other guest is actually in the green room, and I don't want to push him off too much, but this is a long conversation that we. No,
it could be a long conversation. Very open to having it, but just real quickly, right? I would just say, like, I think that a lot of the pushback from it was people sort of taking individual sentences and sort of pulling them out, assuming that they're meant in this completely serious, unironic way, and getting mad about it. I think if you watch it all in context, there are still some things I disagree with in there. Sure. But I think if you watch it all in context, what he's saying is very different from the way it's portrayed. And I think particularly the tone of it is very different from what was portrayed. Like there's a whole like 20 minutes of it that is essentially about his evolution on this stuff and the way that that like interactions with with trans people that like caused him to like to have more empathy and see the point and like literally one of the last sentences of the special is, "I'm not telling any more jokes about this until I'm sure we're all laughing together." And when I got that, like my jaw dropped, because I'd just been seeing a week of people on Twitter portrayed this as if it were like the worst of Reddit in a comedy special, just this sort of like gleefully edgelordish like festival of bigotry for its own sake. It's like this sounds pretty different to me.
Yeah, I agree. Well, should have definitely had you on for 2 hours, but the show is only 1 hour, so we're not going to be able to cover this final headline in the next moment. But if you did write, one of the big stories this week was the death of Colin Powell. You wrote an obituary for Donald Rumsfeld that actually got published and translated into different languages and put all over the world. I have been seeing these half-mast flags everywhere, and I'm like, really? We're doing this? We're putting... It's made me feel very much like a radical. Like, should we do that? Have a half-mast flag for...
No. We should not. I mean, I'll just say, I know Liza Featherstone wrote an article called something like "Colin Powell, politely anguished war criminal," which kind of sums it up.
Yep.
But like the way that people, I mean, one, of course, what everybody remembers and people have quite rightly been bringing up is the speech at the UN where he's like waving around the anthrax and he's just making all of these claims that, like, if you even watched it closely, like the evidence he was presenting just did not remotely match up to what he was saying. And he knew that he was lying about that. I think there's actually lots of evidence since then that he knew that he was lying about Iraqi WMDs. But also, I guess, last thing about this, because I know you got to bring your other guest on, but even if you take that out of his resume, like, let's pretend that like we were in an alternate dimension where Colin Powell never got the call to see if he wanted to be George W. Bush's Secretary of State, that like the sort of end of his career in Washington was stepping down for actually homophobic reasons, if I recall. He didn't like Don't Ask, Don't Tell for the wrong reason. But
meanwhile, let's yell at Dave Chappelle.
Yeah, exactly. While Jamal Bowman even is like, is like tweeting like, "Oh, Colin Powell was an inspiration for me as a young black man." It's like, okay,
no.
but
even if it's true, no.
Yeah, if that's true, maybe you should reevaluate that, right? Like that,
right.
like see if that matches your present values. But I think that even if the Second Iraq War was never on his resume, this is a guy who like committed like really serious war crimes in Vietnam at the beginning of his career, which he talks about in his memoir in 1995. By some accounts, was involved in having climbed the ladder enough by then to be doing this, in covering up the My Lai massacre. Was like the big architect, as he was the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff during the invasion of Panama, which I know is kind of a deep cut at this point. Most people don't remember that, but if you could find an old documentary called The Panama Deception, I would really recommend that. And he was also the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff during the first Iraq War, when the United States was literally like massacring, like buried alive, fleeing Iraqi soldiers on the highway of death. So no, I don't actually think
put the flags back up where they belong.
Yeah, exactly. That would be the headline.
It certainly makes me feel like, am I the only one? You have that feeling sometimes as a leftist walking around in America where you're like, am I the only one who feels this way about the flag? Ben Burgess, thank you so much for coming on the program. I really appreciate it. I'm going on Ben's program tonight, which I hope all of you will join. But if you can't make that particular episode, definitely check out the whole podcast. Give Them an Argument is what it's called. Ben Burgess, philosophy professor and author of Canceling Comedians While the World Burns. Also, Ben, you are on Medium, where you just wrote more about the Dave Chappelle stand-up specials, things that we weren't able to cover. I thank you very much, and I look forward to the next time you join us here at actNOW to go over the week's headlines. Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks, Johanna.
Thanks. Hey, you're watching actTV. Now would be a good time to stand up, stretch, crack your fingers, and then push the like button or whatever you have to do. Subscribe, depending on where you're watching this. You can retweet it, etc. I'm Julianna Forlano. You can find me on Facebook, separate from actTV. I am not particularly actTV myself. actTV has tons of great voices on, including our very own Jocelyn Macurdy Keatts, who is coming up in a little bit on our program. She has a show called Solidarity Live. On Fridays, we have James from the internet on our YouTube channel, and we also have the Ben Dixon Show. First of all, he's going to be coming on this program not too long, I think next Thursday, to do this very same news headlines rundown with me. But his show is on actTV's network now, on Roku, Apple TV, and all that. So we're getting bigger. We thank you very much for that. Stay tuned. I have an interview coming up right after this with David Mitchell for the Patients for Affordable Drugs Now. When he said that the biggest obstacle to passing the reconciliation package was the corporate media. Then, of course, he was attacked by the corporate media, who said it was his own fault for not getting out there to sell it, as if he's not very busy trying to stop the oncoming destruction of the whole world. Anyway, on MSNBC, here's Eamon. He was trying to make MSNBC not look like a corporate mouthpiece here. Listen for it. He says, and I quote, "It's not our job to sell your agenda, you liberals." He didn't say that, but you and your colleagues have to do a better job of selling the bill to American people. But I think it actually is the job of the media to cover what's in the bill that will affect millions of Americans. Let's take a listen to his response.
Democratic messaging has been in the news a lot this week as congressional leaders try to gather the votes needed to pass the Build Back Better Act and the bipartisan infrastructure bill. One stumbling block appears to be sticker shock. That is, the total price tag seems to be making people uncomfortable. Now, I've said it before, and I continue to believe that the lawmakers who are trying to sell this bill to the American public have been making a big mistake. Rather than referring to it as a $3.5 trillion package, they should describe it in the same way they describe the military budget, as an annual $3.5 billion supplemental. But on the day that it was introduced to the public back in July, this is the first thing we actually heard.
The Budget Committee has come to an agreement. The budget resolution with instructions will be $3.5 trillion.
So did you hear that? Did you catch that? That was the first message the Senate leadership communicated about the deal. It was the total price tag. They referred to it as $3.5 trillion. Speaker Nancy Pelosi's communications have also been doing this same thing. They regularly contain reference to the $3.5 trillion price as well.
Okay.
But as the bill languishes, some lawmakers are actually looking to point fingers. On Friday, Senate Budget Committee Chair Bernie Sanders released a statement blaming an easy target, the media. The statement read in part, quote, "The mainstream media has done an exceptionally poor job in covering what actually is in the legislation." That induced this response from the New York Times' Maggie Haberman, who tweeted out, "It's always the press's fault and never the fault of the people communicating something. That's just 101. Now, I don't want to be too defensive, but Senator Sanders, you say we've done an exceptionally poor job in covering what's in the bill. I refer you to this MSNBC interview you did the day after the deal was announced. Notice the scroll prominently rolling there on the screen? That's the list of the bill's provisions. Here on this show alone, we have done multiple segments highlighting many of those provisions, with polls actually showing the popularity they enjoy. Now, in fairness, we in the media can certainly be guilty at times of focusing too much on process at the expense of policy. But with all due respect to the Democratic senator, it's not our job to sell your agenda. You and your colleagues have to do a better job of selling the bill to the American
this is where
public.
I have to stop it. That's okay. There's so much to say in response to this. First of all, you have a booker who invites people on the show. And if you don't invite people on the show to sell the policy, to talk about the policy constantly, then no, they cannot sell it on your airwaves. I just love how MSNBC, who is totally corporate, they're super corporate, is pretending like they have done a good job doing something that would be anti-corporate, which is, a lot of the things that are in this bill. Anyway, to Bernie Sanders' point, the independent media, which we are here at ActTV, has actually been covering what is in the bill. The main big thing, the prescription drug price reform, is one of the most popular provisions we have in the Build Back Better Act. To speak about it, I'm happy to have on the show today someone who was both be affected directly by the outcome and who advocates for folks in need in this area. David Mitchell, cancer patient and founder of Patients for Affordable Drugs Now, the only national bipartisan patient organization focused solely on policies to lower drug prices. David, thank you so much for joining me today.
Julianna, thank you for having me.
We have to do the work that Bernie Sanders said that the corporate media is not doing. So let's get straight to it. Talk about what is in the bill when it comes to the Build Back Better Act, when it comes to prescription drug pricing. What will it do and for whom?
The most important provision is to allow Medicare to negotiate lower drug prices for Americans. Back in 2003, when the Medicare prescription drug benefit called Part D was enacted, pharma did a backroom deal to put into the bill a prohibition on our government being able to use our purchasing power to negotiate directly with the drug companies. It's an ugly story. In fact, the man who was the chair of the Energy and Commerce Committee at the time, a man named Billy Towson from Louisiana, stuck this prohibition in the bill literally in the dark of night. It passed with the overall creation of the prescription drug benefit in Medicare. And then within months, Billy Towson went and took a job running PhRMA, the trade association for the drug companies, to the tune of $2 million a year.
Ah,
This literally happened. It's well-known history.
So it's not an isolated event when it comes to
and not with an amoral industry like the pharmaceutical industry in this country. So the first thing it would do is it allow Medicare to use its purchasing power to get us a lower price for our drugs. You know, right now, Americans pay almost 4 times what other countries pay for the exact same brand name drugs. And it's because we don't negotiate. So it would allow negotiation to lower the prices. It would impose a penalty on drug companies that increase their prices faster than the rate of inflation on an annual basis, therefore curbing the power of the drug companies to price gouge us year over year over year. It would put in place a cap on the out-of-pocket costs that could be charged people under the Medicare Part D benefit. Right now, there is no annual out-of-pocket cap, and I will use a visual aid here. This little bottle, I'm going to put it here. It's called Pomalyst. It's one of my cancer drugs. Cost me more than $15,000 last year out of pocket, just this one drug.
Wow.
And so it would impose a cap, maybe $2,000 or $2,500. Right now,
let me stop you just briefly. How much does it cost if you didn't have any coverage at all? You said $15,000 out of pocket. You have other coverage, right? How much? Do you know how much the whole thing costs?
Yeah, the annual cost. I have an incurable blood cancer.
Right.
It's the same one that Colin Powell had, coincidentally, called multiple myeloma. It's incurable, but it's treatable for some unknown period of time with very expensive drugs. Right now, my doctors have me on a 4-drug combination, and that 4-drug combination carries a list price of more than $900,000 a year. Now,
Let me ask you a question. How much does it cost the pharmaceutical industry to make those drugs?
This that costs $1,000 a capsule, this little bottle, costs less than $1 a capsule to make.
Yeah, see, now that is, I would like that to be in the prescription, the Build Back Better Act. Some price caps. Okay, it cost them $1. Maybe they can make $4. I'd be okay with $4, 4 times the outlay price. It's just egregious and immoral.
And this company that makes this drug that I'm referencing here is particularly bad. It's been documented by Congress that they literally would say things like, well, in order to hit our profit targets and trigger our executive bonuses, we need to increase the price. And the price is paid by me and by every taxpayer in America by Medicare. So they use us as a piggy bank because we have never imposed any kind of restrictions on their ability to dictate the prices of brand name drugs.
What company is this?
This company used to be called Celgene. It was purchased by Bristol Myers Squibb last year or the year before.
We like to name names here.
I'm happy to name Celgene and Bristol Myers Squibb.
Yeah.
And they are chief offenders.
It's really interesting. It's like I never thought of it as basically money laundering. We have a Medicare. They're taking Medicare cash. We pay for Medicare out of our pockets because we want a social safety net. I don't understand how did we get to this place, and how can we get out of allowing the pharmaceutical industry to gouge the American people like this?
We got here because the pharmaceutical industry is incredibly powerful, and it is a monopoly industry in our country. It can dictate prices of brand name drugs. And so by definition, a monopoly has unlimited resources, because if you need more money for lobbying or for campaign contributions, raise the price. And so they have spent billions over decades building a legislative, legal, and policy framework that gives them all the power and gives us none. And that's why what is in the Build Back Better Act on drug pricing is so darn important, because it would reset the policy in this country. It won't be perfect. It won't do everything I would want done, but if we can pass what they're talking about now, it would be a signal achievement and would fundamentally, into the future, help reduce the prices we pay and stop these companies from using Americans as piggy banks.
Unbelievable. I mean, everyone's kind of I don't think people are actually thinking of it like that. They're thinking of it like, oh, of course, bills should be less. People are on a fixed income at a certain point. A lot of, older people. I mean, it's not just older people that obviously need medicine, younger people, et cetera. But I don't think people are thinking of it as actually an opportunity to really put big pharma in their place.
Well, and it's not just older people. We have 360,000 people in our community now, and many of them are young. Many of them are diabetics who have to have insulin to live. For a diabetic, insulin is like water, but it costs $300 a vial, this water that they require. Or people with multiple sclerosis or cystic fibrosis, the sickle cell disease. These all affect people of all ages and young people, many, many young people. And they are struggling. The millennials who are in our community will tell you, I have to organize my whole life around being able to afford my drugs. And I'm afraid to change my job. I'm afraid I'll be fired. People shouldn't have to live that way in this country, live at the mercy of multinational corporations.
David Mitchell, can you talk to me about, I started the segment talking about how MSNBC and other corporate media outlets, but I specifically focused on MSNBC, are saying, oh, it's the politicians' fault that people aren't talking about this more. But it does seem like their corporate outlets, everything you see on MSNBC in between segments is a pill commercial, is a big pharma commercial. I mean, what is your take on the coverage that specifically the drug pricing policy and the big Build Back Better Act has been getting, both on left and right, or ostensibly left, we'll just call it corporate, I guess, media?
So I'm going to do this in two parts. The first part is to say, as clearly as I can, we're in a fight with the drug industry. We're not in a fight with the news media. Having said that, it is very unfortunate that pharma is often allowed to get away with peddling lies and scare tactics. For example, one of their chief scare tactics aimed at a patient like me that needs new drugs if I'm going to live as long as I hope to, is to say that if you lower our prices, we're not going to innovate and invent new drugs. That scares people. But pharma says it all the time, and many times the media reports it as if it's true when it's not. On the other hand, I would hasten to add that we've had over the past 6 weeks 4 good fact checks, one by the Washington Post, a couple by Kaiser Family Foundation, a couple by PolitiFact fact checking, to point out that these things that pharma says are not true. But my point is they are frequently incorporated into stories as if it's the he said that goes with the she said, not he said it, meaning someone from pharma, but it's not true. And they have a lot of money, they have a lot of power, they buy ads that say these things, and then the media feels compelled to report them even though they are not true.
And yet it's incredibly popular
Oh, this is the most popular provision in the Build Back Better Act. That the provision being allowing Medicare to use its purchasing power to offset the company's pricing power to get us a better deal on our drugs. And it outpolls everything. By the way, many other things are important. The climate change stuff, the child care stuff, the pre-K, all of it. It's all important, I know. But our issue is drug pricing, and it outpolls all of those, which is surprising to me on some levels. And then I think about the fact that it really is both a healthcare issue and a kitchen table issue. And when you put those two things together, you get particular political power. 90% of the people in America, like 82% of Republicans, 87% of independents, 92% of Democrats, 90% in total support allowing Medicare to negotiate on behalf of Americans.
Thank you so much, David. David Mitchell, cancer patient, founder of Patients for Affordable Drugs Now. I really appreciate the fight that you are part of, that you are forwarding, and I wish you the best of health, the best of luck. And once this thing passes, please come back on so we can celebrate.
That'd be great, Julianna. Thank you for having me.
Follow David on Twitter at David P, the number 4 AD. I'm assuming Patients, the number 4 Affordable Drugs. David P 4 AD. You're watching Act TV. Coming up next, our action rundown with Jocelyn. So stay tuned. Watching Act Now. I'm Julianna Forlano. In August, hi, Jocelyn. Hi, I see you there. I was going to go straight into the introduction of what you just did yesterday, but since you're right there, I'll just let you do it.
Well, hi, everybody. Can you hear me, by the way?
Yeah, we can hear you.
We good? Okay, sorry.
I love how you're on the scene. You're so on the
exactly.
scene. I love it.
So yesterday we were in front of the White House where faith leaders and League of Women Voters and Movement for Black Voters were getting arrested.
Oh, you're frozen.
With the intent of calling upon the Senate to do the right thing and pass the Freedom to Vote Act. That ended up not happening. We needed 60 votes and we got 49. So nowhere close. A couple key senators were counting on Republicans to negotiate. Why we still do that, I'm still not fully clear. This is are we listeing to people? Or
no, we're not listening. Not yet. We're just watching. Now we're listening to you.
Trust they're saying smart things.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, as per usual, and as we talk about a lot on here, there are certain key Democrats that are still counting on negotiation from Republicans to protect federal voting rights at the federal level. And if that were going to happen, they wouldn't have repealed the Voting Rights Act. So
don't you find it just egregious that they can be like, actually, we don't want people to vote? And, that's the interesting part is people on the side who would support this, our side, progressive people, don't I think it's hard for us to get our minds around the fact that the right is actually fascist and they don't believe in democracy and they're just fine with completely destroying it. Bold-facedly, they're not ashamed of being like, oh, we're not going to vote for voting rights. And they don't even parse their words like Black lives, of course, matter.
Right.
But, we can't have cheating. They're not even doing any of that. It's just like, no, we don't.
No.
We're going to gerrymander. We're going to, suppress the vote. We don't care. Your vote doesn't matter. And we've almost got you in a headlock.
And I love that you bring up literally everything you just said, Juliana, because I really do think that Democratic voters need to understand that Republicans at this point have no interest in winning the public opinion. What they have a deep vested loudmouth interest in is rigging the map in their favor. And I think people have a certain idea that, oh, Democrats gerrymander too, not like this. And if people want to do more research, there are tons of movies and documentaries on this about the big lie. And we are entering an era of voter suppression that is just as aggressive as we had in Jim Crow. Last year, Black voters turned out in larger numbers than ever before. And that's why they're doing this.
Yeah.
It's terrifying.
It is terrifying. I think, I don't even know where to go with this, Jocelyn. It's like too much almost. But I am heartened that people are out in the street at the Capitol, showing their displeasure, making it known that this is very important to people. We have some clips of folks talking. We have Ben Jealous from People for the American Way, right? That's where he's at the head of. Now he's at the head of something all the time. Is that right? That's where he is.
That is correct. That is absolutely correct.
Did you see him while you were there? Did you get a chance to talk to him?
Yeah, Ben Jealous is wonderful. Ran a very close progressive race for governor of Maryland. Just a wonderful dude on every level.
Yes. So close.
So close.
Well, let's listen to him. We have a clip here and then I'll get your thoughts.
Like 20 of us. Virginia Case from the League of Women Voters said it was time. It was time for us to stand up to the White House again. It was time to risk arrest again. For a year, we have built a movement. From the day that Joe Biden won, we have built a movement in this country to secure the voting rights of our neighbors. For months there have been protests up on Capitol Hill. Getting the bills through the Congress. Pushing to build a consensus in the Senate. Let us be clear, Vice President Kamala Harris, President of the Senate, and Chuck Schumer, the majority leader, have done their job. They have consensus, they have the 51 votes, they have enough to pass. And in America, majorities should matter. And now, what we know is that when the filibuster is the issue, when a minority is able to hold up a majority in the Senate, there's only one way you get through. And that's when the president himself says, you know what Donald Trump said when he wanted to pack the Supreme Court? He said, just get it done. Get the rules out the way. You run the rules and you fix the rules and you get it done. So we're saying, hey, Joe. Hey, Joe. The filibuster must go. Hey, Joe. The filibuster must go. Hey, Joe. The filibuster must go.
Oh my God, I love that guy. And I love the energy. What was the energy like while you were there? The energy of protest is wonderful.
It was incredible. So we've gone out with people now, and did my sound cut off? Can you?
A little, but that's okay.
Okay, sorry. We've been out twice, and it's just singing and a lot of young people, just such vibrant, high energy, because there is an understanding that this is the mirror image of the civil rights movement. And these are, in some cases, literally, we spoke with a gentleman whose father fought for civil rights in the South, and he's back out here now. And it's a little bit haunting, and it's a lot haunting, but I think it's terrifying for a lot of people to have watched their grandparents and sometimes parents fight for these rights that they're now fighting for again. We should be focused on other issues.
I think it's really interesting to watch sort of the whole political mechanism happen. Joe Biden didn't just come in and say, we're getting rid of the filibuster, because that honestly would not have been a politically good idea for him to do right off the bat, I don't think, because unfortunately the Democratic Party is made of a lot of centrists and people who live in the suburbs. So, it's not all people who are directly white people who live in the suburbs, I should say. White people in the suburbs are also in the Democratic Party. So, you've got this bill that did not go, that basically shows where we're at, what the limits of the federal government's ability is to protect voting rights, given the situation that we're all in. Then people in the streets are out protesting, educating, rallying, pushing from the outside, giving him the impetus to do it. And now he has the platform to get rid of the filibuster, which would actually be friggin' huge for a number of things. It would affect our ability to mitigate climate change, because we'd actually not be, have the stranglehold of corporate interest around our necks. I'm sure they'd find another way to try to crush everyone, like getting everyone to be Joe Manchin or Kirsten Sinema or whatever. But, it would loose things for a little while for people of conscience to be able to do things that are not unconscionable, like we're seeing, we saw under the Trump administration and to some degrees under Democratic administrations as well. Your thoughts?
I mean, you're absolutely right, Juliana.
God, you're my favorite guest. Every time I say something, that's a good point. I'm like, no, that's a good point.
I'm sorry. Do you want me to? We can argue about something if you'd like. I'm totally down for that. We don't really disagree.
There's enough arguing. I mean, you and I are doing what improv comedians called play yes and. I'll make a point and you'll say yes and then you will creatively bring up something else, which is interesting. And I'll say, oh, that sparks an idea in me. This is the opposite of the media landscape that's like, Jimmy Dore said this and that one said that. Now I'm going to say this. And it makes people crazy. It makes you part of the divisive system, really part of the problem when your mind is just sucked into being, you're trying to stay up with the news and you wind up having to eat poison in order to do so. So hopefully we're not doing that here on this program.
No, and I don't, it's so funny because I think everybody is used to that pundit sphere, but it's actually very new. If anybody is interested, you should watch this movie I think it's called like The Best of Enemies, but it's about Buckley versus, oh my God, what is it? Gorvidal, sorry. How did I blank? I love that, right? He's a great writer. And it's about how there's this thing that we're used to in the mediascape now of people arguing all the time, but it's actually pretty modern and incredibly toxic. But
thanks,
not the
Facebook.
Point. But sorry, are we going over?
We're a little over, but we're off the leash, and I'm enjoying this conversation.
So the Freedom to Vote Act that we were protesting did not pass, but because Schumer was voted against it in a procedural move, it will be up for a vote again, which is why we all need to be calling our senators. But ultimately, at the end of the day, the Republicans they're just out of control. We've seen
that is fascinating. I bet they're going to I'm sorry to cut you off. I bet they're going to, it's possible that this might pass because we're holding up we might have to end the filibuster. And you certainly don't want that. You know what I mean? There's a tension there.
Well, and
that
for
might
anyone,
push people
didn't you have a filibuster man on the show? You definitely did.
I think I did.
Kill Switch. Well, what is his name? Adam Gentleson. You guys should read that book.
Yes.
It was a great show, and that's a great book. But I think a lot of for people who don't know, the filibuster is a legislative tool which always favors the status quo. So that's why Republicans want it.
Well said, Frozen Jocelyn.
The filibuster is something which makes it very difficult to pass new legislation because you need an increasingly large majority, which is why they do it, because they don't want to create a new way of working and doing things which favors climate, racial justice, sexual orientation protections. They don't want any of that. So they know that they don't have to do anything new. They can just make sure that we can't do anything. And that's, yeah.
And it what's something that comes to me as we're talking about this is the corporate Dems, the centrist Dems, but really they're whoever's the really corporate Dems. I'm not sure how much they actually want to end the filibuster as well, because a lot of them take the same money that the Republicans take. A lot of them take the same money that, Joe Manchin is a coal mine guy. He's taking the same money. It's not like we can trust him to vote on it, but even the ones you would think maybe would want to be on our side, it is actually this issue is forcing people to choose. Are you going to be with Manchin, who's really a Republican, or are you going to be of the people? This is one of those issues that just shows exactly whose side are you on.
Well, and I think it's getting increasingly difficult for people to argue that public opinion does not favor these legislative interventions. 80% of Americans are for the Build Back Better agenda, and that includes literally everything we're talking about. There are very few people who don't want voting rights protections. The people who want that are Senate and congressional Republicans.
We're going to have to wind up this show soon, but I do not want to miss the fact that Alyssa Milano was at the event. She has been very active recently. I met her at I think it was a Planned Parenthood demonstration. I got to speak with her then, and she still had the big hair, the big 80s hair, and I had big 80s hair, and we were like, big 80s hair, and we bonded over that and our love of women's right to choose. But she was there yesterday and she got arrested. Let's take a listen to what she had to say when she got the mic.
Corporations and billionaires from spending unlimited amounts of money. So I don't like when politicians break promises on issues as important as voting rights. And that is why I am here today, willing to risk arrest with all of these incredible people behind me. During the last year, we've seen nationwide 425 pieces of legislation that have been introduced. 19 states have adopted 33 bills that is making it more difficult for people to be able to vote. And it's not okay.
Not okay.
Not okay.
Most often, these bills are targeting communities of color and restricting access to the ballot box. And that is why we are all here today. In order to make the promise of democracy real for every American and stop corporations and billionaires from spending unlimited amounts of money to buy elections and to thwart the will of the people, we need to take action.
Action.
So
we are
good.
demanding the Senate to pass the Freedom to Vote Act, the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, and DC statehood as soon as possible. Show me what democracy looks like.
This is what democracy looks like.
Show me what democracy looks like.
I love it.
This is what democracy looks like.
I love
Show
it.
me what democracy looks like.
This is what
All right, that was
democracy
great.
looks
You know,
like.
Thank you
Jocelyn,
very
I have a question for you. How important is it? Two things. How important is it that, number one, people do get arrested, and number two, that people of prominence, like Alyssa Milano, show up to speak at these things?
Well, there's a lot of people who really organize around the theory of jail sacrifice, which is that when we put our bodies on the line in that way and are willing to risk arrest, it is a form of, you know, there are a lot of faith leaders that were present yesterday. And when we did this earlier in October, who believe that when we make ourselves vulnerable in that way, it's almost a spiritual act. And obviously is more likely to garner attention because it has more of a seriousness to it than simply showing up. Showing up is important too. I'm not trying to minimize that. But when you have, to quote Ben Jealous, when you have the League of Women Voters out there willing to get arrested, women who were willing to get arrested for suffrage, that's the origin of that organization.
Oh, you froze, Jocelyn.
Sorry,
There
you as the president should really question where your priorities are, because they're calling upon Joe Biden to do more to pressure the Senate because it's his job. We have a majority right now and we need to use it.
I hope he will. I hope he will. It seems to me that if left to his own devices and politics was not at issue, that this would be an issue that he would care about. I mean, historically speaking, it does seem like this would be an issue that is important to him. So I guess we'll see. We'll see what happens. I personally, I was thrilled to see Alyssa Milano. First of all, I grew up watching Who's the Boss with Tony and all that. You know, they were like Italians on TV, or at least portraying Italians on TV. And I was Italian at home. So to me, she has a special place in my heart. And also, so many Italians have gone over to the wrong side and forgotten their immigrant roots, forgotten their immigrant story, believe that they, although Italians are very hardworking, generally speaking, but you know, who isn't? You got to see if you're good, you know, they believe they earned it when, you know, and then they decided that, I don't know. I'm very disappointed with my brethren who really forgot their roots. Not a lot of rich Italians came over because they were rich and they wanted to get richer. Most came over because they were, as my father would say, morte fame, right? Literally dying of hunger. So let's not forget that. And just so happy to see Alyssa Milano taking it for the team there.
And she was great. Everyone was really, when you're down there at these actions, it's just, I'm always struck by the dedication and the passion of the people there. These are, the right-wing media loves to place progressives in this unhinged, you know, I don't know what they want us to be, like anti-fascist people with like ski mask or something, but no, it's not the energy. There are priests, nuns, Jewish faith leaders, a lot of Jewish organizations were organizing yesterday, and just a very beautiful gravitas around the whole thing.
Okay, I'm sure none of my family members are watching, and Jocelyn, we do have to go, but when you come on, I love talking to you. So I do want to announce that Jocelyn is going to be a regular part of this show from now on. So hooray, we're very excited about that. She has her own segment that she's producing, and she's going to be on more regularly. So I'm very thrilled about that. My husband got in an argument with his, I don't know if I hope you're not watching. I'm sure they're not, the family. with one of his relatives said something like, blah, 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 the budget, blah, 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 all the right-wing talking points. And then she said something about like, they're Antifa. And he said, your father was Antifa. Your father fought in the Second World War. He was anti-fascist. That's what Antifa is. Like those talking points have penetrated so deeply that people don't even know what they're literally talking about, but they're so worked up about it that they have lost their rationality. Anyway, more on that. Do you want to make a comment before we?
Nope. Agree with all of that.
You're the best guest
As
ever.
an Italian American, I co-sign on this.
Jocelyn Macurdy Keatts, thank you so much for being on the program. We look forward to talking with you more next week. Thanks so much. Jocelyn came all the way from, she was in Michigan, the wilds of Michigan, where there's very little internet. And she made a great effort to find a spot where she would be able to be with us mostly with just a little bit of freezing. Anyway, I'm Julianna Forlano. I hope you enjoyed that show. We have so much good stuff coming up next week. In fact, we invited Alyssa Milano to come on this program to talk about this, but she had been arrested. And today, I think she was at Congress testifying about the ERA. So she's very busy on our behalf. Hopefully we'll be able to bring her on in the coming weeks. Thanks everyone for watching. That's it for us for now. I'm Julianna Forlano. This is ACT TV. We will see you next Tuesday, 2 p.m.